We're wrapping up the series that I started 4 weeks ago on skills that you should show off during your high school basketball tryouts. Now, if you follow along for the past few weeks, you've seen us talk about control, communication, and hustle. Well, today we're going to share how you can stand out on the defensive end of the court. Let's jump in and discuss. Welcome back to Hard Smart Together. I'm Coach Dave. I'm here every week to help basketball players become the smart, confident players that coaches love. So 99.9% of coaches love defense and emphasize defense. Why do I say 99.9%? Because there's no absolutes, and I know someplace out there's going to be a coach or a player that says, my coach doesn't really care about defense. They're all about offense. And so I don't like absolutes, and I didn't want to say 100% of coaches, but close to 100% of coaches love defense, and they love defensive players. Okay, even those that emphasize offense love defense as well. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about some simple ways that you can stand out on the defensive end of the court. Okay? They are ways that you can stand out in a tryout scenario where it doesn't matter the scheme of defense that your coach might be running during the season. It doesn't really matter about your skill level, but there's simple things that you can do that really make your coach say, boy, that's the kind of player I want on my team. Okay? Now, these are the same types of skills we've been talking about over the last few weeks. All of them are culture building skills. Skills that the coach sees a player that stands out with these little, nuanced skills, and they go, I can build a culture around that player. I can build a culture of defense around that player. I can build a culture of hustle around that player. I can build a culture of communication around that player. And I can build a culture of control on the court around that player. So all these skills are around building culture and helping a coach build culture. And that's what gets you on a team. That's what gets you in a starting lineup. That's what makes you one of the coach's favorites. So today we're going to give you some tips on standing out on the defensive end. Before I get started, I always like to give you a free gift just for listening or tuning in today. Okay? If you haven't already downloaded the 8 intangible skills coaches love to see in players, these are great refreshers going into tryouts. It's a checklist form, and it gives you some ways to implement and show off these skills as well. Simply go to the link that I have in the description below, or you can go to hardsmarttogether.com/intangibles. I'll be sure to get you that free gift. So what are these tips to stand out on the defensive end? To show off your defensive skills, no matter your skill level, no matter the defensive scheme. Well, the first one, we've talked about this in entire episodes in the past, but the first one is be the player that is consistently in a defensive stance on the defensive side of the court, in a defensive stance, in a defensive wide stance. Okay? Why does this make you stand out? Because so few players can consistently stay in a stance. They can't stay in a stance, or they don't stay in a stance for an entire defensive possession. And they're not in a wide stance. What do I mean by a wide stance? Get down in a deep stance and keep your arms out wide. This is also going to cover up maybe some of your quickness deficiencies you might have right now on the defensive end. Maybe you're not the greatest one-on-one defender right now. Being in a wide stance visually tells the offensive player, I don't know, there's not enough room to maybe go around that player. They're prepared, they're in a stance. So you're not going to get driven on as much being in a wide defensive stance. Okay? And it stands out over all the players that are coming up and out of their stance, or maybe not getting into a stance, or not in a stance when they're on the weak side of the court, or whatever the case might be. Stand out with a wide stance consistently through the defensive possession. Number 2, another stand out kind of skill that's really simple. Finish each defensive possession with a box out. We've done entire episodes in the past on this as well, where we get into technique. But we're not going to talk about technique. It doesn't matter your technique. Box out in some fashion. Find an offensive player and make contact with the offensive player when a shot goes up. Make that a habit. You'll stand out because not every player does it. In fact, most players don't. They turn around and they look for the rebound, okay? You yell out shot, make contact with an offensive player, even if it's not the player you're guarding, it stands out to a coach. You might be one of the only players in a stance on defense and finishing the defensive possession with a box out. Third tip, be the player that emphasizes your transition from offense to defense, okay? What do I mean? When an offensive possession ends, whether it's a made shot, whether it's a missed shot, a missed rebound, whether it's a turnover, whatever the case might be the player that is in a habit of immediately turning and getting back on defense. Be the player that sprints back and have a goal of being the first one back on defense, back in a stance, a wide stance, ready to defend, and you'll stand out. You'll stand out because so few players are quick to transition from offense to defense. Boy, lots of players are quick to transition from defense to offense. But be the player that stands out with your transition game from offense to defense. Be the player that sprints back, okay? Be the player that stands out from the players that aren't doing that. Number 4, this is so critically important to show off your basketball IQ. We dedicated an entire episode to communication. So if you watched a few weeks ago, we talked about using names and using useful information. The defensive end is so full of information that you can do to organize your defense. What are some of these things? We just talked about turnovers. If you're the one that's sprinting back and getting in a stance, communicate with your team. I've got ball, you get first pass, watch the wing. Coach listens to that. Well, that player has some basketball IQ. Listen to them communicate with their teammates, right? In a defensive possession. Screen right, screen left. I've got your help right, I've got your help left. Watch baseline, watch skip pass, shot up. There are so many things that you can say on the defensive end that's useful information that your coach in a tryout goes, basketball IQ, I want to build my culture around that player. So be the player that stands out on the defensive end of the court. Be the player that your coach goes, I need them on my team because I can build a defensive culture around this player. I can build a hustle culture around that player. I can build a communication culture around that player. I can build a control on the court culture around that player, right? Even if you're not going to be a starter, even if you're the last one off the bench, make the team earn the trust of the coach with these little nuanced, easy skills to implement and to eventually make habits as part of your game. So that's what I got for you today. That's how to stand out in your tryouts, show off these defensive skills that anyone can show off, and you will stand out. If this was useful, give me a like, give me a comment. If you've watched the last 4 weeks, which one of these skills to show off really resonated with you? Which one are you going to emphasize? Or are you going to emphasize them all as you get to tryouts in a couple weeks? And until next week, remember to play hard, play smart, and play together. See you next week.